All right, now we're joined by Willie Gregory, who's running for Municipal Court Position 5. So go ahead with the 2-minute introduction.
Oh, yes, thank you. My name is Judge Willie Gregory. I'm running to retain my position, Seattle Municipal Court Position number 5. I've been on the Seattle Municipal Court bench for going on my 8th year. And I've occupied numerous positions as a Seattle Municipal Court judge. I first started out as being the jail judge and mental health court judge, and then I was our community court judge. Currently, I serve as our Veterans Treatment Court judge and a general trial court judge. And recently, I've also been selected by my peers to be the assistant presiding judge in Seattle Municipal Court. The reason I became a judge was one day I was up in Snohomish County practicing as a lawyer, and I had a friend who had a cap on, and she told everyone to forgive her for wearing a cap because she has cancer. And so I called her up and we had lunch, and the first thing she did was she offered me a job as a judge pro tem, which is a judge who covers for other judges when they're sick or on leave. And so I started pro temping for her, and then I started pro temping for other judges, and the more I started pro temping, I realized this is something I wanted to do with the rest of my career. And so then I, after starting to pro tem more, I decided to run for municipal court judge about almost 8 years ago. And I have not looked back, and I love my job, and I'm happy for your endorsement that you've given me before, and I hope to get your endorsement again. And I want people to know that the one thing that I do in my courtroom is I make sure that people feel respected, my staff and myself. We make sure that people feel respected, that are heard when they come into my courtroom, because I always feel that it is not my court, but I'm the judge who is managing the court for the people of Seattle. And I hope people feel that way when they come in that court, and I do whatever I can to make sure they feel that way. I'm a very hard-working judge because I also believe that in this position of trust, you have to give it your best all the time.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So now we have our 4 prepared questions. They're right in front of you if you want to turn them over and read along with us as we read them aloud. These are 2-minute answers. Figure out where we left off. But Sherry, would you do number 1, please?
What barriers to access are there in the courts for unrepresented litigants, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable populations? And what steps have you taken to promote access to justice?
Good, all right, thank you. My first 12 years of practice, I was a public defender. So I was constantly making sure that my clients had access to justice. I would make sure when I had a client who did not speak English, that person had an interpreter, that it could help them understand what was going on in court. And as a judge, I make sure that people understand what's happening in court. And about unrepresented litigants, I've had, this past week I had a gentleman who was unrepresented, and he wanted to proceed to represent himself in a DUI case, and I explained to that gentleman that it's a very difficult case, and that he should really think about doing that. But we have this form we had him fill out, and after he filled out the form, I realized that there was only one reason why he wanted to represent himself, and it wasn't a legal reason. And so what had happened was a public defender who was in my court came down and talked to him, and what we did was we actually continued this case over so he could get an attorney and be represented by someone in court. Because the majority of our cases are all criminal cases, and I feel that if a person comes into Seattle Municipal Court to handle a criminal case and they're unrepresented, they're really behind the 8 ball, because the prosecutor definitely knows what's going on. They filed the charge and everything else too, so that person has someone on their side who understands the legal system, give that person some help as they go about defending themselves. And other steps I take into access to justice, I'm also currently chair of the District Municipal Court Judges Association Diversity Committee. And we're actually taking access to justice by, number 1, we're putting on a pro tem training this upcoming summer. And what that's doing is that's opening up pro tem in the judge positions to judges of color and to women who are unrepresented in our ranks. And so, and other things I've been doing is I mentor at Seattle University School of Law. And one of my mentors is a young lady who's a first-year student. I love mentoring the people and really just trying to tell people what the law is all about, answer their questions about the law, especially when you're a first-year law student. You're very scared and very nervous about things. So mostly what I've been doing for her the past month is telling her so everything's going to be okay. We've all made it through it. That's one way that I really try to help access to justice.
Great. Jason, number 2.
Yeah.
Okay. What state or federal Supreme Court decision do you disagree with the most?
But I can tell you the one that I really disagree with is the Dred Scott decision. And that is a decision where the Supreme Court held that African Americans were not U.S. citizens. And I remember when I was in we really dealt with that case a lot in law school, but undergraduate school, and I'll tell you the two differences about dealing with, in law school, we dealt with it from a legal theoretical point of view, but when I was an undergraduate school at the University of Arizona, we dealt with it in more of kind of emotional kind of view. And it was kind of interesting to see those two different points of views, but it's always, to me, just meant a lot to me, because I always used to think, what would have happened if the court decided the right way, which the right way would have been, obviously, to hold that African Americans are U.S. citizens. What would have happened then? And so, you know, that I even thought about that recently when I had a case dealing with something similar like this, but not totally. But, you know, I just think about, what if the court had made a right decision? Where would we be at now, especially what's going on in our society right now? People respecting one another. Another case that I disagree with is the Korematsu decision. And that's the decision where the Supreme Court upheld the executive order of President Roosevelt, concerning the internment of Japanese Americans. And again, that case is just, and the reason that case means a lot to me is at Seattle University School of Law, they've done a lot in making sure the Hirobashis and Korematsu has really gotten to them what they've lost when they were interned. And I remember reading about that and hearing about that as a young kid and just thinking, wow, here goes these people, they didn't do anything. They were U.S. citizens, and they got pushed off their land, put in these camps, and treated like they were basically like they were animals. And so, I mean, those are decisions that made by my brethren and my colleagues, and I totally disagree with those decisions. And I know nowadays we all disagree, but you know, it's really interesting to think about during the time people didn't disagree with those decisions. Those were the law of the land. And so what it makes me think about as a judge is I have to also, just when I look at my decisions, make sure I do the right thing, make sure I follow the facts and the law.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, number 3.
Please share an incident or aspect of your work history that has changed or enhanced your interpretation of the law.
I'd say probably being a public defender, representing people who were really down and out, representing indigents and homeless people. And the reason that changed my mind is there's been time in my life where my family's been on food stamps and been poor, but I've never been homeless, and just really talking to people about their situation. And really just finding out how people deal with being homeless and how you deal with just hand them out. I think that changed me a lot. And actually something that really changed me when I was a public defender working in juvenile court. And at the time, we didn't have social workers, so I was basically a social worker for my clients, taking them to get food, get clothes, and things like that. And I was just like, wow, this is, you know, just, my heart really went out to those kids a lot of times. And that really changed my life a lot, being a public defender. And I didn't know, I mean, when I started doing it, I thought actually I'd be doing that for a career, but then what happened was I became a private attorney, had my own law firm. And when I had my own law firm, as much as I could, I would try to, sometimes much to chagrin of my wife, you know, help people out as much as I could and lower my fees if I could help people out. But really just being in the system and seeing a lot of people just struggling with, like I said, homelessness and substance abuse has really affected my life in a lot of ways. You're welcome.
Hold number 3.
Please describe your beliefs around the concept of restorative justice and whether you see a potential for a judicial action from the bench as influential on that process.
You're probably talking to the right judge, because as I told you, I worked in 2 therapeutic courts, and that's what they were all about, is restorative justice. And actually, when I first got in Seattle Municipal Court, I was asked if I wanted to work in a mental health court, because we said you kind of have the bent to do that, and we think you'll do really well there. And so I'm really an advocate for restorative justice. I think it's something that really should be taken care of. And again, it goes back to talking about people who are homeless and people who have substance abuse problems and other issues that we really need to address. And the mental health court is a great court for that, because a lot of times the reason people come to that court is because of their mental illness. And just so when I was mental health court judge, I would love just seeing all the success stories we had when people would graduate from mental health court, and you know, because they've now gotten on their medication, gotten housing, and so I'm very much a proponent for that. Same when we in Seattle, when we had community court, I would love it when people graduate from community court and we'd all stand up and give them, clap our hands for them and everything else too. A lot of times people just say, Judge, no one's ever done that for me before. It's just really nice to see. And we do the same thing in Veterans Treatment Court, when people have done very well. When the Veterans Treatment Court, we call it treatment court, there's a component of that person has to have treatment, but there's also a component that a person usually has, they're suffering under post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I think if we did not have that court, with a lot of our veterans, they would still be suffering through both of those different maladies, the substance abuse issues and the post-traumatic stress issues. So again, like I said, this is really just right my wheelhouse right here for being restorative justice. That's pretty much all I've done since I've been on the court. And I think we can do better. I really think we can do better with restorative justice, and our bench is really trying to. And I think courts are changing now. I mean, my court has changed since I've been on it. We have more therapeutic courts and more judges starting to think in a therapeutic way. I mean, actually, when I do sentencing, I think about things in a more of a therapeutic way. But how can I make sure this person gets help? I can make sure this person does not show back up in my courtroom. So that does influence what I think about when I have a defendant before me and how I sentence a person. You're welcome.
Great. So now we'll open up to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers. We'll start with Elizabeth.
So I work as a court-appointed guardian ad litem in the mental health court. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas of how or can that be enhanced in the mental health court?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do have some ideas that could be enhanced. The last I've heard in our mental, are you in settlement?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. The last I heard was that we lost housing, and I hope that's not true, and I hope we get that back, because when I was in mental health court, that was the biggest proponent that we had. That was the best thing we had, was we could get a person out and get them into housing. And pretty much all literature I read when I was a mental health court judge talked about housing. I think that's the number one thing we have to have in place in mental health court, and all of our courts like that, is have housing. So I think once we get housing in place, then we can start thinking of all the other issues with people, and that's the biggest thing we really need to have in place. And I think we also need to have some buy-off on, make sure we buy off on the defense attorneys. That's been a problem with our court right now. That's something we're really trying to work on and get that back on track. But the housing is a key component. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions? Jason?
I'm a person with developmental disabilities, and I'm going through the expungement process in Alabama, and I would like to see, a better process here in this state. Could you tell me a little bit about the difference between vacating and sealing records?
Yeah. Well, vacation, and I should tell you this, full disclosure, when I was a private attorney, I handled clients vacating convictions. So basically, when they came to me, we talk about the case, and first I'd find out if it was one of the ones that fit, because the DV case, no DUI case, but there's certain ones that would happen. And if a person did fit in there, then I would do all the paperwork, and basically what would happen, which would be a great thing, was that enter or not guilty, withdraw the guilty plea, enter or not guilty plea, and the case would be dismissed. And actually, those were fun cases to do because of that, seeing people be able to do certain things. And as for vacation, you don't ask about expungements, right? A lot of times people ask about expungements. We don't have them here.
Yeah, don't have them.
Right. But as for sealing, sealing is a lot different.
What's sealing?
Sealing a case?
Yeah.
That's a lot, and I'll tell you why it's a lot different. Whereas expungement is a legal way to do it and everything else. Judges, all we have to do with the sealing of case, of documents, is when the parties bring it to us. Because I always take the position, and I tell people this, tell my staff, it's not up to me to be the proponent of sealing any documents, because I'm a public official.
Right.
But if someone brings it to us, we have to go through certain criteria. And if they fit that criteria, yes, then we'll go ahead and seal the document, and it will not be open to the public. Yes.
Do you agree with many community and faith leaders who say the new youth jail would being built in Seattle would not only send the wrong message to our community, but is a waste of our money when compared to the dramatically lower cost of renovating the current facility, and how the money might be otherwise spent for the benefit of the community?
Good question. When I worked in juvenile court, I did 2 stints there. I remember going to visit clients and what they had, and I have to tell you, I had some clients who, yes, needed to be in jail, but not in that jail. I can tell you that. It was deplorable seeing those kids in the jail they were in. And so I don't totally agree with that. I mean, I think we need to have something like that, but we also need to have, in a jail like that, schools, counseling, substance abuse treatment. We need to make sure, because these are kids. Obviously, we know that. So when these kids get out of any kind of jail, that they can go back into society and be able to be a productive member of society. Employment training, I think that's the way we look at it. I don't think we should build some huge jail with the number one aim of putting kids in there, but there's some kids that are gonna have to go to jail, be put there for a while. But again, like I said, while they're in jail, we can't treat them like animals. We need to treat them like humans and make sure they come out and they're ready to be a productive member of society, engage in society.
Time for a few more questions.
Yes.
Nicole?
I'll do a fun one. Who are your judicial role models and why?
Oh, that's an easy one. Thurgood Marshall was my number one. I've always loved Thurgood Marshall, what he stood for and everything else. And I'll tell you why he's my biggest role model is because of Brown versus Board of Education. When I moved to Tucson, Arizona, I was bused. And I went to a school that if I didn't go to that school, I probably wouldn't be sitting before you today. I went to the best school in Tucson, Arizona at the time. They didn't have private schools or anything else, but I went to a school where teachers cared about you, where teachers pushed you. I had a social studies teacher who I used to always talk a lot. Okay, I know it's a surprise. And what he thought about it, he said, you know what I'm gonna do? He's our student council representative. You can, bring things back. He found something for me to do instead of kicking me out of class for talking. He said, okay, we're gonna make you do something. And so all my 2 years at junior high, I was in student council. 3 years in high school, I was a vice president of my class because that teacher really got me lit about stuff. I was a political science major because I started liking politics. And so because of Brown versus Board of Education and being bused, this is where I am today. So Thurgood Marshall is my hero. Now, yes.
Yeah, how about take a minute to finish your story?
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I have heroes around here too, a lot of heroes around here. Number one, Judge Richard Jones. I think he's a U.S. federal district court judge. The reason I think he's a hero is he's a federal judge. He can stay up in this ivory tower and not do anything, but he comes to a lot of events and he supports a lot of people. He's always at the Lauren Miller Bar Association meeting, which is African-American attorneys, and he's always in the community. He's a great example to other judges that we need to get out there, and he does a lot of mentoring, and he cares about people. And so when I used to practice for him when I was doing felonies in Superior Court, I love practicing for him. He knew what to expect, and I like that about him. Other judges, Judge Judith Hightower used to be on our bench with us, and I love the way she cared about people. She really cared about the people that came before her and treated them with so much respect. She's now since retired, but I always try to remember that when when you're having a tough day and everything else too, is just remember that the way that she used to treat people and the honor she used to give the people.
Great. Time for another question or two. Ben?
Seattle prosecutors are seeking to vacate more than 540 convictions against people caught carrying small amounts of pot in the city before legalization. Do you believe this policy should be expanded to include other marijuana offenses?
It's kind of tough for me to handle that because that motion's right before me at this time, so I can't really answer that question. No, give me another one.
Could I change it then? Could you just address mass incarceration in our state and what we can do to reduce it and have more equity in the way laws is practiced?
Oh, yeah. First thing we started doing is making our schools better. The person's doing better in school, they're not gonna be out messing around, they're not gonna get in a lot of trouble. I'm a firm believer in that. We make our schools a lot better. And if people get in jail, we don't keep them in jail. That's what a lot of that is about. Like I said before, if someone goes to jail only for a little bit, let them do something else instead of sitting around just hanging out with other people in the same kind of situation. But like I said, I'm a former public defender, and I do think there's definitely an issue of mass incarceration, especially with people of color. I think the best thing, again, we can do is if just school support, and support of people's families, and support of people who are homeless people with substance abuse issues. Just really give support to the families. As we know in our community, we have a big problem with homelessness, just like all over the U.S. That's the best thing we can do about it. But like I said, I'm really a firm believer in education. So I don't know where I would be today without great education.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jason, do you have another one?
Yeah,
Please.
let's say 20 years down the road, where is our justice systems kind of heading, or which direction should we head to, or whatever?
I think if we don't head to more restorative justice, the system's probably gonna just blow up. If we keep going the way we were going about 10 years ago, we probably would have blown the system up. It would have been with a lot of mass incarceration. I think what we really need to do is focus more on the therapeutic courts and the restorative justice. Even if a person's in jail for one day, we should do something. So try to get people services, try to help them say, you're gonna be out tomorrow, but this is what we can do. This is, you have some substance abuse issues. Why don't you go here? Why don't you go there? Or take care of them. At our court, we have a court resource center, which people can go to. They get clothes. They can, we have a DUI victims panel program people can do, but really just give people services and justice. And so I think that's the way we're going. I think the courts are going more towards a restorative justice model, which hopefully means that the courts will get smaller and society will get better. I mean, not the courts, but the jails.
this sounds all beautiful to me.
Yep.
I endorse that vision. So on that note, why don't we end with a 30-second closing from you?
Sure, okay. Well, I hope I receive your endorsement. I received it before. I would be honored to receive your endorsement. I thank you all for inviting me here this evening. And I thought first you were gonna give me some math, but I'm glad you did. But I really appreciate your questions. It shows that you all care about your community, and I care about the community as well. But I really appreciate all you're doing. I know you're volunteers doing this, but I think it's great that you're doing this for judges, because a lot of times people don't know what we do. They don't know what's going to wear mystery. And I'm a proponent for judges being elected, and you're helping to help by doing things like this, interviewing us and putting this on your website. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.